skills, and in this module we have 5 1-hour sessions starting from problem solving in ambiguity environment, how do you lead the problem solving initiative, and how do you manage creativity and innovation, and how do you develop sustainable solutions, and so on. So it will consist of 5 1-hour sessions which will complete this whole module of power skills. So today we are into the final one, sustainable problem solving. So it's all about not the decisions that you make, it's not about the problems that you solve and the solutions that you develop, it's all about the sustainability of those decisions and the sustainability of those solutions, which is critically important for today. Today, what are the learning outcomes? Evaluate the long-term implication of implemented solutions on organizational sustainability. So we know that, as I told you earlier, what is important is not the decisions you make, not the problems you solve, not the solutions that you make, right? It's about how sustainable it is as a decision or as a solution, number one, right? Because if it's becoming obsolete tomorrow, then there is an issue. Then the next part of sustainability comes, is it sustainable when it comes to the broader society, the ecosystem of the country, and so on and so forth, right? Create adaptable framework for addressing emerging trends and challenges in business and accounting contexts. Develop strategies for integrating and emerging technologies such as AI in your analytics and problem solving processes, and then evaluate future challenges to ensure proactive readiness and resilience in decision making. So these are outline framework for the day, and we'll go into one by one as it comes. Right, so first let's look at what do you really mean by sustainability. So sustainability is your ability to maintain or support a process, system or state over a long period, meeting the present needs without compromising the future generations. Very clear, right? It meets the present needs. That's so your decision is acceptable today, right? But on the long run, does it compromise future generations? So I'm just trying to give you a small example here, right? The Ditwa, the calamity or the crisis that we are seeing today, most people are saying it's as a result of certain human actions of cutting down trees, and also certain quarries of taking out stone for and metal for building projects, right? And certain lands being refilled for building purposes and so on is one major cause of the crisis that we are facing today. So probably it would have met the present needs of that time, right? But has it compromised the future generations? Similar thing came up when the port city came up to see, because it's reclaimed land, you reclaim land from the sea and you develop a huge port city. So there was a question as to whether this could have other effects on the other parts of the beaches and the surrounding areas of the country. So I think proper feasibility studies have been done, so that's good, and we believe that it has been done properly. At the same time, you have another huge example where reclaimed land has been used. If you look at the Hong Kong airport, if you look at their runways are built on reclaimed land, right? So I'm sure proper feasibility studies would have been done on possible environmental damage or any other thing into the future. So there are two parts of this sustainability. The decisions that you make today, the problems that you solve today, and the solutions that you have today. Number one, is it sustainable by its own? Because if your decision that you made today, if it's becoming obsolete in 1 year's time, the decision or the solution has become obsolete, right? Not sustainable. Second thing, when you look at the broader society, is your decision hampering or compromising the future generations more from a broader environmental and societal perspective. So these are the two considerations. So it's about using resources wisely so that they do not run out. Now, classical example is I was doing a case study somewhere in 2012 or maybe 2010, somewhere there. There was a ruling by the European Union for all the companies, business enterprises of the European Union to have a 50% balance between renewable and non-renewable energy consumption in their business operations. Okay? So, what is renewable energy? What is non-renewable energy? Non-renewable energy are the resources that deplete with the use and they basically run out, like coal, gas, fuel, right? More and more you use it, it runs out, because it's not renewable. Okay? Then comes the renewable energy sources. What are the renewable energy sources? Like hydropower, wind power, solar power. It doesn't run out with usage. It doesn't run out with usage. So, what was the ruling of the European Union? Basically, by X year, for you to have a European Union that is using 50% non-renewable energy, 50% renewable energy, right? Now you look at the sustainability issue it has caused. Those targets were not met. And as a result, you had the region suffering and the whole world suffering as a result of the Russian-Ukraine war, right? So probably you're not going into a decision or not complying with a decision, or your lethargy in complying with that decision had a problem on the future society in terms of resources. So as I told you earlier, your sustainability in decision making is twofold. One thing is your decision or the solution sustainable by itself, and is your decision and your solution sustainable on the long run, considering broader environmental and societal aspects of the world. Now, what is organizational sustainability? Organizational sustainability is where an organization's ability to maintain long-term viability balancing economic, social and environmental stewardship. Now we are coming into a model a little later, but is your decision making balancing the pillars? We are going to talk a little bit about the pillars a little later. Economic, social and environmental stewardship, right? And it does not compromise stakeholder needs of the future generation. It involves embedding values, ethical, inclusive, resilient operations by ensuring that you run a more sustainable business in a global landscape. Right. So this is called the triple bottom line, and we have 3 P's to the triple bottom line. So profit, people, planet. Now let's take a little bit of time to explain this broader model, right? So a sustainable organization is called an organization which balances the triple bottom line. Number 1, profitability. Why do you need profits? You need profits to sustain the business, right? You need profits to invest in the business for growth, for new product development, to explore new markets, and to look at new opportunities. You need profits, right? And also, basically, you need profits to pay salaries and look after your employees. So, the traditional CSR model is being challenged. What do you mean by the traditional CSR model? The traditional CSR model saying that we draw resources from the society So it's a moral obligation to give back something to the society is a bit of a traditional view, and we are talking of more strategic CSR today. So what do you mean by a strategic CSR? Investing on a business that will have long-term benefits. Because the reason is, a CEO cannot wake up in the morning tomorrow and tell that I am going to spend X billion rupees on Ditwa relief, right? The current crisis. Why is that? Because a CEO of a company does not have the power to do that on his thoughts, because the reason is because it is shareholders' money. But what do you mean by strategic CSR? Strategic CSR is investing on a venture that will basically have future effects, positively contributing towards your business. So profits is number one. Okay, profits is number one. Second one is people. So who falls into the category of people? Number one, employees, right? Number one, employees. Okay. Number two, the broader society. Suppliers, your connected stakeholders. That's the people pillar. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit of an example about a strategic CSR initiative. So strategic CSR initiative is very close to corporate sustainability initiatives, right? And I was at a conference one day. This was as soon as the war ended, and there was a business sustainability specialist talking about strategic CSR and business sustainability. So he was telling, if I was in the leisure industry, if I was in tourism, and if I had a hotel chain in Sri Lanka, spread across Sri Lanka in most of the tourist prone cities, one of the strategic CSR initiatives that I will take up is infrastructure development. Roads, for example. Why? Because there is no point you having a 5-star hotel and then a tourist bus takes many hours to get there and a very, very kind of a bad route. So if you invest on your infrastructure, that's going to indirectly help me to win my business goals on the long run. That's one example. Okay. Now the people factor. There are many fishing and farmers living with Cargill's money. Primary producers, fishermen, farmers, and so on. So what is the objective? If I am dependent on my suppliers for quality products at a good price, I invest on them. I invest on them. People factor. Second, the company that I worked for before, we took up a strategic CSR initiative of health awareness. And health awareness was to do with two major diseases that was significantly affecting the Sri Lankan population. One was diabetes, other one was dengue. Even today we have it. So research showed that in Sri Lanka, 1 in 3 is a diabetic of some form, starting from small children. Okay. Now, why did we get into diabetes awareness? So, diabetes is a problem that causes multiple complications. Eyesight complications, kidney function failures, right? Heart disease, and many other diseases, which is a primary reason of diabetes. And what happens? For a life insurance company, if you have that kind of problem prevailing in the country, that magnitude, you're bound to have higher health claims, you're bound to have higher death claims. which has a major sustainability issue on your operation. On the other hand, on the reverse of that, if you invest on reducing diabetes rates, your reinsurers will be able to give you better pricing, and that pricing benefit could be passed on to the customer. So we decided that we get into diabetes education to prevent diabetes and to manage diabetes. And same with dengue, we saw it as a national issue, right? So that's a people factor. Okay, so invest on your staff, invest on your look after your staff, look after your connected stakeholders as a main format. And then planet. Planet is about how do you ensure that your company runs a business where the planet keeps you going for the next 10 to 15 to 20 years for you to continue to be business. So basically it talks about reducing carbon footprint, reducing paper to stop the cut down of trees, and so on and so forth. So these are the triple elements that you see. Now you see, if one element of this is not there, what happens, right? Planet, profits. If you're only with these two pillars, you're running a viable business. You're running a viable business. Okay? If you have the people pillar and the profit pillar, you're equitable. So you're providing equal treatment for people, right? Profits is managed, people are managed, people are paid well, and you are looked after. It's an equitable treatment. People and planet, you're running a bearable operation. You can bear it, but on the long term, you might not be able to sustain because you're not focusing on your profit. And who's going to invest in your business? So once all the three pillars come together, you're running a sustainable business, right? So if you look at today, most of the sustainability rankings of countries for companies is done through the work that they do to have a positive impact on the three pillars of profit, people, and planet. And this is called the triple bottom line. So what are the emerging business challenges, right? Digital and tech disruption, we have that, right? Digitalization is taking away jobs. So jobs which are kind of repetitive and high volume. Repetitive and high volume businesses are getting replaced by technology. And also digital disruption. Business models are totally turning 360 degrees. So that's called a tech disruption. Intensified global competition. So you have global competition today, not local competition. And what happens is, the biggest problem for local entrepreneurs is that the global companies will have better scale advantage, right? They'll benefit from economies of scale and so on, and you will have scale advantages where they'll have better demanding power with their suppliers and be able to give better benefits for the customers, right? So, and then economic volatility. Economic volatility is there. Still certain parts of the world are unstable, right? So inflation and interest rates are one of the best or one of the biggest indicators. So we are happy that now in Sri Lanka the economic status is sort of kind of easing off. So we have a low inflation rate and the interest rates are low, and that those two indicators. Critical workforce shifts, talent shortages, right? However much we talk in Sri Lanka that there is unemployment, right? University graduates don't have jobs. You will see that still there is a shortage of talented employees, very clear. And of course, we had a bit of a skill drain in the past. Now it has reduced to a certain extent, where we used to lose people because of migration, right? normal migration, education migration, work migration, whatever form, migration was very high during the last maybe 2 to 3 years. Now it's easing off because some of the doors are closing from Australia to US to UK to Canada, for example. Canada was a classical example where basically lot of Sri Lankans used to migrate for education, and most of them by now has got their PR. So we talked about a skill migration, and still places like certain parts in Europe and countries like Finland in particular are still open. So we have a talent shortage, hybrid work environment, flexi working hours, flexible working, work from home, and employee well-being is another big concern, where people are talking extensively about work-life balance and the excitement of work and so on and so forth, because the human factor is getting more powerful compared to the industrial era. Today we are in a knowledge worker era, so people are more worried about their excitement in the workplace and the workplace well-being compared to just doing a job for money. Regulatory uncertainties. So you will see that there are a lot of regulatory changes, and you will see a lot of regulatory changes in Sri Lanka as well, right? So you will see that certain regulatory frameworks will be brought in to regularize industries and for proper governance, and that's a good thing in one way, but you will see that it's a challenge for yourself because it's change for you. It's a change for you. So I think it's a good model for a country to bring proper regulatory changes to suit the current challenges in the business environment. And you have to adopt to consumer behavior, which is rapidly changing. Rapidly changing. The X generation customer is different to the Y generation customer, and very, very different to the Z generation customer, right? So you will see that more and more people will be less brand loyal, and they'll be more value for money driven, right? That's some challenge that most of the organizations will have to work on, right? And also most of the traditional things are going to get automated, so people will think of basically how do I get things easier and faster. So you will see that education industry, the consumer behavior is changing, right? People would like to take up short courses for their higher education as opposed to sitting through a 3-year degree program, and the market is nicely adopting to that. So if you look at on the net and search for big courses online, you will see that you will find short courses as short as 6 months, 1 year, right? Which are coming from top universities like Stanford, Harvard, Cambridge, where you are able to do at quite a low cost, right? And complete at your cost. And then if you want you get an e-certification, and if you want to get a hard copy certification, you only have to pay an extra couple of dollars, and you get it couriered to you. So the education industry is becoming more and more flexible, and it is meeting the demands of the current business environment as well as the consumer, right? Now that's a typical change that is happening in the education industry. So if you look at what is the industry or country requirement, volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, shorter planning cycles, which means shorter learning cycles. Your 3-year degree has become obsolete by the time you finish it, right? So today there is a national need or a global need for shorter education cycles. That's on one side. And on the consumer side of it, they want shorter courses which are more flexible, where they can learn at their pace. And that's what exactly the modern education institutions are providing. So classical example to adopting to new consumer behavior. So these are some of the biggest business challenges that we have today, and organizations has to be sensitive to this and adopt to these changes. So let's look at the common decision making challenges. What are the biggest challenges that we have when making decisions, right? Number one, lack of information. We have discussed in one of our previous sessions that making decisions and problem solving with inadequate information or incomplete information. So this is another big problem. So lack of information can come in many forms. No information at all, some information missing, information that was there but not relevant for tomorrow, right? It can come in various forms, but lack of information is a big issue. Emotional factors, right? So today we are talking about how emotional factors are becoming more important than technical and other rational things. So you need managers today in their decision making to use both your head and heart, right? Both your head and heart. Because if you were to use only your head in your decision making process, then the question need to be asked is, why do you need a human being? System will tell you what to do, right? So you're trying to solve a problem of a employee, right? So you're making a logical decision, right? Okay, do you have this and this and this? If you don't have, you don't have it. Now the question is, for you to make rational decisions, logical decisions, the question is, do you need a leader, right? But you're considering the emotional aspects of the employee and trying to make a decision considering both the logical factors and the emotional factors. That's only where you need a leader. So emotional factors are becoming much more important today. I'm not saying you're taking irrational decisions or not logical decisions. You use both logic and feeling in your decision making process. So this is why topics like emotional intelligence has been brought into curriculums today, heavier in weightage compared to before, is because you need managers to take more rational and emotional decisions combined. Risk assessments are critical because the fact remains that your old risk assessment mechanisms will not work for tomorrow, because the reason is you are working in a very, very different environment and a fast-tracked changing environment. We talked about the VUCA factors before, right? And then group dynamics. We talked about the group dynamics a lot, and how groups behave is critically important, because it's all about how teams work together, collaborate with each other, coordinate with each other, so that you make better decisions. Time constraints are there because the reason is you cannot take a lot of time over decisions, right? Analysis is important, but you need to ask, how long are you going to invest on analysis, right? Because sometimes but the time that you spend to analyze, the situation has changed, right? So there is a nice saying from Apple. Apple says, don't waste your time trying to identify customer needs, because by the time you have identified the customer needs, they have already changed, right? Interesting. So those days, when we were learning marketing, right? What was the definition of marketing? Anticipating, identifying and satisfying consumer needs at a profit and in a socially acceptable manner, right? So probably the identifying part has already lost its validity. So still, to somewhat extent, assuming part will be still there, right? So that's what Apple goes on to say, that don't waste time to identify customer needs, right? By the time you have identified it, it's already changed. So time constraints are there because the cycles are getting shorter. Cognitive biases. Now, first of all, let us try to understand, what do you mean by cognitive? Cognitive means knowledge. Knowledge is good, but knowledge also could create significant bias, right? This is how we have learned, right? What you are saying is wrong, right? Especially coming from the X generation. But the problem is, how relevant is what you have learned in the past? So cognitive bias is another critical consideration in decision making. So These are some of the common decision making challenges that we have: lack of information, emotional factors, risk assessment, group dynamics, time constraints, and cognitive bias. So let's look at decision making made easy. Start with an analysis. Nobody is saying there is no place for analysis. There is a place for analysis. But the problem is, as I told in one of the earlier sessions, there is a saying that too much of analysis results in paralysis. So for what do you need analysis? You need deeper analysis if your division is difficult to reverse. But if it's easily reversible, probably you spend less time on analysis and you use more of your intuition. So it's a matter of how you use a ratio of analytics versus intuition. Compare your options. So we discussed in decision making that never take a decision one dimensional with one alternative. You develop multiple scenarios, multiple alternatives, and compare options. What if we do this? What if we do not do this, but in place do this? You need to compare your options. Question your assumptions. What are the problems that you might face as a result of this decision? What are the complications that you might have to face? What are the repercussions that you might have to face? Not only the positives, but the repercussions. And then walk a mile in another's shoes. Interesting one, right? Also could be named as empathy, where you are able to see another person's issue from their perspective, and also think like a customer, right? Now I do customer service training programs. So people spend money, companies spend money, and send their staff for customer service training. And the first question that I ask them is, so a good 20,000 rupees, 30,000 rupees the company has invested per day on a particular individual, and they're sending them for a training program at Renuka City Hotel or someplace, right? So there's a 30 audience, right? And the first question that I ask them is, I look at their eyes and ask, why did you come? And everybody is surprised. Is he mad? Because my company has spent good 20,000-30,000 rupees and taken me off work for one day and sent me for this program to learn customer service and customer care, and the trainer is asking, why did you come? Now there is a reason why I asked that question, right? I asked them, how many companies you are a customer for, right? Obviously you are a customer of a couple of supermarkets. You are a customer of at least 1 or 2 or 3 banks. You are the customer of at least one mobile company, right? You are a customer of No Limit, House of Fashion, Fashion Bug, Kelly Felder, G-Flock, you name it, right? So why do you need customer service training? You just make the customers feel how you want to be treated. But having said that, we do a lot of concepts, theories when we do our customer service programs. But if you don't change that hat, that only theories and concepts will enhance your customer service, you're sadly mistaken. So you need to wear the customer's shoes even in order for you to implement those concepts, theories in practice. So that's why I asked that question. So few things which are important: start with an analysis, but decide how much of analysis is required for that type of decision. Next, eliminate bias, which is critically important, right? Bias can come in many forms. Earlier we talked about cognitive bias, but bias could come because of many forms. Bias can come because of your knowledge, because you know a lot about that subject, or else it could come simply as a part of ego. I don't want to give up, right? But you need to eliminate bias. Compare your options and then question your assumptions and try to look at it from a consumer perspective, another stakeholder perspective, and so on. Right. So decision making in challenging times. You have to be agile and flexible. Why? Because your market demands you to be fast and flexible and adaptive. You can't be strong-headed and say, I'm not going to go with this, right? So I know of one university at least, I don't want to mention the names, one UK university who has a franchise here, right? They said, our model is physical. By no way we are going to convert it to online. And you won't believe, for almost 2 years, they didn't run programs. So you can be headstrong, but you'll be non-competitive. So innovation, we have already talked about a lot in the previous session, and strong financial and strategic planning. Strategic planning is also important, financial planning is also important, right? Every strategy has an investment, and you have got to critically look at where you invest how much, right? And where do you deviate from certain investments and think of different investments. So it has to be a continuous monitoring process. You can't go until you hit a wall and say, we have depleted all our financial resources, now we can't even turn back, right? So it has to be a periodic review of how you invest in your financial resource in terms of implementing your strategic plan. Database decision making today is becoming the hot topic of the day, because you're inundated with data, right, which you did not have earlier. It's like Google, for example. I can remember when we had to develop content in the early 2005s, we had to go through lot of hard material reading to develop content, right? I mean, today you just search it, right? I don't recommend normal Google searches, but the internet is inundated with scholarly articles based on research, right? So there is good quality data, but the fact remains that what is the data that you use, right? Because of a normal Google search, what you will have is collected data from all sources. But when you are developing educational material, you want it to be supported with more research data rather than data getting planted to one place that is being picked up by a search engine. So you want database decision making. Balancing logic and intuition, so that's why I told you earlier, logic is coming from information and intuition is coming from your innovative thought. Critically important. Don't be over dependent on logic, facts and data. You need to have intuition also. As I told you earlier, what is the decision that you're taking? Is it reversible or non-reversible? If it's reversible, you can use more of your intuition. If it's non-reversible, you will use more of your information, data, and so on. You need to break big problems into smaller pieces, right? This happens even at homes, right? You have a big problem at home, but you need to break it down. What is the problem? Is it the finances? It is the dissatisfaction among the family? Is it too much of stress? Whatever it is. So you need to break it down. Even in a business setup, it's like that. You can't have a very big problem and find solutions. You need to break it down to small pieces and see what are the small pieces that has made and accumulated into this big problem. And you need to address those small pieces, which is critically important. Focusing on controllable outcomes. As I told you earlier, there are controllable outcomes, there are non-controllable outcomes, right? There are some outcomes you can't control. So we all know the pestle factors, right? So the pestle factors, the traditional most model of political, economic, socio-cultural, technological, ecological, and legal, right? Uncontrollable. So of course the political and legal is connected together because it's the politics which will develop the legal frameworks, right? So P and L is often connected. Can you control it? You can't control it. Economic factors are the broad economy. It's to do with inflation, interest rates, borrowing rates, right? Can you control it? You can't control it. Socio-cultural factors, can you change it? You can't. So the fact remains that the broader environmental factors are non-controllable. So you need to work on the controllable outcomes, right? So it's about a hybrid between what you challenge and what you adopt to. So I'm just going to ask you a simple question. Which is easier to do? To carpet the whole world or to buy a pair of rubber slippers? Simple, right? But what do we try to do? We always try to carpet the whole world. Easier to do, go to DSI, buy a pair of rubber slippers, right? Your feet are still safe. So you need to know when to challenge, when to adopt, right? And involve others, but be aware of bias. So what do you mean by involve others? We earlier talked in one of our previous sessions that if you brainstorm alone, it will be limited to what you know and what you like, right? You need to involve a group of others so that you have diverse views, but you need to be aware of biases, right? Don't let bias come into that. You have to make it very rational in your decision making. So what is a sustainable decision? Your decision be valid for tomorrow. Will your decision be valid for tomorrow? Right? If it's not sustainable. So I told you earlier, your sustainability in decision making are two folds. One is your decision relevant and valid for tomorrow? The decision itself. Now it is more micro. Second thing is the decision that you take today, does it affect the future generations, the future society, like making significant changes to the ecosystem of a country? Now that's more macro. But the more micro part is your decision today valid for tomorrow? Your competitive advantage strategy be relevant in the long run, right? So you have a competitive advantage strategy. Will it be relevant for on the long run, right? Or will it be copied by somebody? So if a competitive advantage strategy is very easily copied by another person, it becomes irrelevant. So competitive advantage is what you have and what you are different from customers, or from competitors rather. Okay? Make room for change. Be flexible, make room for change. And then ensure your decisions meet diverse stakeholder needs. We discussed that in our previous sessions. And also periodically evaluate your decisions. No decision is carved in stone. You should be able to reverse, change, modify your decisions. So let's look at the framework for sustainable decision making. The first stage is scoping. Identify risk, vulnerabilities, objectives, and establish decision making criteria. So you identify the broader environment in your making this thing, and then you are establishing your decision making criteria, right? And then you look at the analysis. Identify options, assess risks. We touched this in decision making process in one of the previous modules. And evaluate trade-offs. Trade-off is what you give up to get something that you want, right? Evaluate the trade-offs. Is this trade-off worthwhile, right? And then planning. Select tactics and instruments that you are going to use. Design the intervention, test it, and refine. Why do you test it? For you to refine it, to ensure that you have got the final solution right. And then comes the implementation part, where you implement the decision, monitor frequently. That's why we said in the earlier one, right? Keep room for periodically evaluate your decisions, make room for change. So that's why you basically monitor and review to make changes, modifications as and when required. Adopting strategies to align with the emerging trends. Conducting a trend analysis. How has the trend gone? How has the trend gone? Right? Trends can be not continuous, but trends give us some kind of judgment of how things are going and how things will go. But in a very, very challenging environment, we can't only go through a trend analysis. We have got to feed in other factors and factor in other factors as well. Embrace technological advancements, right? You have to see where the technologies are changing. Okay, so next we move on to adopting strategies to align with your emerging trends. So number one is conducting a trend analysis to see how the trend has been, upward, static or going down, right? The simplest format. Now, in a trend analysis, there is a positive and a negative. Number one is trend analysis is good to see how the past trends have worked, but you have to be always careful whether that trend will continue, right? Because if the business environment is changing very, very rapidly, right, sometimes those trends might be obsolete. Then you might have to factor in, okay, this is the trend analysis I have done, but I factor in certain things that you review and see whether that trend will continue. That is pretty important. Second one is embrace technological advancements. See how things can change with the technological environments, which will get digitalized, how it will have an impact on our business. Will things change? Will the consumer behavior change? And then collaborating with industry leaders. So today it's all about collaboration. It's all about collaboration. It's not working alone. Now I told you the example before that Cargill's, how they achieve their competitive advantage is by getting hold of the supply chain, right? So their collaboration was different. They collaborated with the supply chain, right? Because they wanted to give lower prices. Now, if you look at Spar Supermarket, their competitive advantage strategy is different. They want to provide the customers with a quality shopping experience with greater choice, right? With greater choice. Not that they don't compete in price, they do compete in price plus, but they want to give a wider choice. So what do? Their primary concern is not collaboration with the industry, with the supply chain, right? They want to collaborate with a supply chain company who will do that job great for them. So they have outsourced the supply chain to Haley's, one of the best logistics companies in the country, right? And also people collaborate with other industry leaders to share expertise. So it's today all about sharing what you can do well with the others and getting what they can do well with you. So classical example is if you look at Pick Me, for example, right? Look at the model. They don't own a single taxi, they don't own a single bike or a trishaw. They don't own a single driver, they don't own a single rider, right? They only run the app. So they have decided whom to collaborate with. Forget about industry leaders. Whom do you collaborate with your business model to have an effective business model? It's not about owning everything. But if you look at the traditional kangaroo company, they bought and owned and parked and maintained and managed a fleet of taxis, right? But today you decide to collaborate with somebody who has it. And you have access to any three-wheeler that is running on the road. So where you hit your collaborations is critically important. Monitoring consumer preferences, we talked about that earlier, and how do you leverage data analytics. Okay, we are going into the final few slides, and next topic is AI and data analytics in problem solving. So what AI and data analytics have done is it has revolutionized the decision making process by using algorithms and having massive databases to give you solutions, right? Massive databases to give you solutions. It uncovers hidden paths faster, right? For us, in the absence of AI, the hidden paths would have been very difficult to come. But today, the search engines like crawlers, they basically find the information where it is quite fast, right? They're called crawlers, they find the information pretty fast. And they are able to give us predictions and so on. Providing real-time support. However, it requires vigilance against bias and transparency issues. Now, vigilance against bias and transparency issues, because the data you get is the data they collect, right? And where the data is from is a question mark, right? So now, again, another problem is you have got to be very careful in using AI and analytics. So I'll tell you a classical example. One of my friends, he told the story to me, and he was climbing up Hantana in his car, right? And all of a sudden, his engine was stalling, right? Engine was stalling. So he stopped halfway. It's a steep mountain, so steep climb. So he stopped halfway and typed on AI, this is happening to my engine, what should I do? And the AI gives him a reply, remove the battery wires and fix it again, right? And he climbs up, no problem, very happy, and he's going up and telling me, I did this, see, I found a solution from AI. I said, thank God to you, you will have to come down and reset the entire computer system, right? Because the thing is, in a hybrid system, you never remove the battery without giving a support. So the problem is, while it's very quick, all the advantages are there, right? Your questions that you ask and the data you ask has to be very precise, and also you have to double check it with some other source to see, without solely dependent on the source only. So what are the consequences of unsustainable decision making? A lot of reading material, so I'm not going into the entire thing, right? It's left to you because you have the slides. Biggest repercussion spans from financial loss to reputational loss to legal and litigation issues and operational domains. So as I told you earlier, if the decision is reversible, you have less problems. If the decision is irreversible, you have bigger problems, right? So benefits of AI and data analytics in problem solving: enhances accuracy because it gives us information by analyzing a lot of data than what we had. So there will be a limited amount of information that you can get if you are brainstorming in a room, but if you are using data analytics, they are able to give a bulk of information. Increased speed, you are able to find it very quickly. Scalability, you can scale it up. And then cost reduction, it optimizes resource allocation and automates tasks. So these are some of the benefits of analytics and AI in decision making. Challenges: one is bias. AI models can inherit bias from training data, leading to skewed results, right? So basically, it all depends on what amount of data who collect from who, and what amount of data comes as positives or negatives. So the decisions can be skewed. Transparency, explainability. So you have the black boxes making it hard to understand, right? So they give out something. Like black box is something like in an aircraft that you have. So Indian Airlines crashed, and the black box will tell you probable reasons for its crash, right? But the fact remains that sometimes it's very difficult to interpret and then understand. Integration complexity and cost. Implementing AI-driven systems can be challenging and expensive, and that's another issue. Right. So this is a little bit about the black box, and I think that's the last slide. So the term black box in AI refers to artificial intelligence system, particularly complex deep learning models whose internal decision-making processes are basically difficult for humans to understand and interpret. Now this is the biggest problem. Data is there, but it's difficult to interpret and understand. Going into the final slide, future-proofing the decision-making process. So you have future-proofing. Future-proofing means making your decisions more sustainable on the long run. Building adaptability is critically important. You should be able to adapt in difficult situations. Foresight to see the future. Resilience in your processes. And then moving beyond immediate data to long-term trends. So not the immediate data, you have to move into long-term trends. That's why we talk in all our sessions, we talked about scenario planning and different scenarios, and basically you being ready to adapt to different scenarios. So what are the key strategies? Embracing strategic uncertainty. Understand that uncertainty is there. You can't challenge it. Challenging bias. People will be biased because of cognitive bias, because of their learning and knowledge. People will be biased because of egos, right? People will be biased because they don't want other people to challenge them. Whatever it is, you have to remove the bias. Continuous learning. In one of our previous sessions, we discussed about organizational learning and learning organization, so I'm not going to repeat on that. But continuous learning refers to you learning from opportunities and threats, right? Opportunities and threats. And then creating feedback loops to learn and pivot quickly. So this is the session for us today. So we talked about how do you develop sustainable problem solving, sustainable decision making. We talked a lot about sustainability itself, and we talked about sustainability issues coming for your decisions and problem solving in two folds. One is more micro. Is the decision that you take today relevant for tomorrow? Right? The solution that you gave today, is it relevant for tomorrow? Now that's more micro. That means the decision that you are taking today is relevant tomorrow. Next one is more macro. The decisions that you make today and the solutions that you give today has a longer term negative impact on future generations, the future of a country, economy, and so on and so forth. Right? And we touched upon a lot of areas how to be aware of that. And we talked about how data is going to help that, but again we discussed the limitations of data and the areas that you should be careful about. So that brings us to the end of the session and the final session. So this entire power skills module consists of 5 sessions, and we believe that we have shared a lot in terms of how do you lead, solve problems, decision making in a VUCA environment. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and an ambiguous environment. Now you might wonder whether problem solving and decision making are the only things which are important in a rapidly changing volatile business environment. Answer is yes and no. Because the reason is what we do day in, day out as leaders, 80% of the time is solving problems and making decisions. So that's why these two areas are given prominence over the others. Because for you to get your business decisions right, you have to consider that you are actually 80% of the time spending on decision making and problem solving. Until we meet again, thank you very much and good luck.